I have been curious to know for the longest time when I
This is not just a Hollywood love story. This is a story about intuition, jealousy, and a truth that stayed hidden for 10 long years. To the public, Rob Reiner and Penny Marshall were television royalty, a power couple, beloved, successful, seemingly unbreakable. But behind closed doors, Penny Marshall lived with a quiet, suffocating feeling that something was wrong. Not an argument, not a scandal splashed across tabloids. Something colder, something she couldn't prove, but couldn't ignore. Another woman was there, always there, standing beside her husband week after week while Penny sat in the audience, pretending everything was fine. And here's what makes this story unsettling. Penny's suspicions weren't imagined. They weren't paranoia. Years later, they would be quietly confirmed. Long before fame found them, Rob and Penny were just two kids growing up on the same street in the Bronx, so close they could see each other's windows, yet forbidden to cross the road and meet. Life kept them apart until comedy finally brought them together inside a small, scrappy, improvisational group. Rob noticed something instantly. They carried the same little objects in their pockets, the same humor, the same rhythm. Penny felt the spark too, even though she was older, already divorced, and raising a young daughter. None of that mattered on April 10th, 1971. After Rob finished taping an episode of his hit sitcom, they got married. No glamour, no Hollywood spectacle, just Chinese takeout and promises. Rob vowed to always be Penny's best friend. Penny promised to try not to make him nervous. It sounded simple. It sounded pure. But even before the wedding, fate had already planted the seed that would slowly destroy them. Both Rob and Penny auditioned for the same new television show, a risky sitcom that would later become legendary, All in the Family. Rob landed the role of Michael Stivic, Meathead. Penny auditioned to play his on-screen wife. She didn't get the part. Instead, the role went to another woman, a woman who would spend the next 8 years pretending to be married to Penny Marshall's real husband. Her name was Sally Struthers, and Penny Marshall would watch it all happen from the audience. Penny Marshall didn't just lose a role, she lost it to the one place she could never escape. Every single week, she showed up to the studio, not as a cast member, not as a guest, but as a wife sitting silently in the audience. While cameras rolled, Penny watched her real husband pretend to be married to another woman. She watched their jokes land, their timing sink, their comfort grow. To keep herself from reacting, Penny brought needlepoint. Her hands stayed busy while her mind spiraled. Years later, she would admit the truth behind that habit. She did it to keep her hands away from her throat. That is not the voice of a woman who felt secure. That is the voice of someone fighting an emotion she wasn't allowed to express. Behind the scenes, the explanation for Penny losing the role made the situation even more painful. Norman Lear, the creator of the show, would later admit Penny was funnier in the audition room. She wasn't rejected for lack of talent. She was rejected because the show needed a softer daddy's girl dynamic, something Sally fit more easily. So Penny lived with a brutal contradiction. She knew she was good enough. She knew she could have done it. And yet, she still had to sit there and watch another woman live a version of the life that might have been hers. Week after week, the chemistry on screen became impossible to ignore. Rob and Sally weren't just reciting lines, they were relaxed, natural, effortless, and Penny felt it. Then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon at CBS, Rob pulled Sally aside. Penny was coming to the taping that night. Sally was confused. Penny came every week. Rob's response was cold and final. Sally was not to say hello to Penny, not a smile, not a word. When Sally demanded an explanation, Rob admitted something that stopped her cold. Penny believed they were having an affair. Rob tried to soften it. He said Penny misunderstood Sally's friendliness, compared her to a cocker spaniel puppy, warm, open, wagging her tail at everyone. But the damage was done. Rob instructed Sally to wait until Penny spoke first. According to Sally, that moment took years, not weeks, years. What looked like jealousy to outsiders was becoming isolation, and Penny Marshall was being slowly pushed into emotional exile, watching, waiting, doubting herself. But here's the cruel twist. Decades later, Sally would admit something that reframed everything Penny ever felt. She wasn't imagining it. She was sensing something real. Years passed. The show became a phenomenon. The marriage quietly estranged. And then, long after the damage had already been done, the truth surfaced. Decades later, Sally Struthers made an admission that changed the meaning of everything Penny Marshall had lived through. She confessed she had been crazy about Rob Reiner, not admiration, not respect, real feelings. She admitted she sent him candy while he was directing plays, that they went out to dinner together more than once, that she tried in her own quiet way to move closer. Nothing physical ever happened, no affair, no crossed line anyone could point to. But the feelings were real, and suddenly Penny Marshall's jealousy didn't look irrational anymore. Imagine what Penny lived with. A wife who watched her husband work beside another woman every week. A wife who felt something shift in the air. A wife who was told she was imagining things, only to find out years later that the other woman did harbor feelings. Feelings she never fully acted on, but never denied either. Penny hadn't been wrong. She had been early. But suspicion wasn't the only force crushing the marriage. As All in the Family ended, Rob struggled to find work that matched his earlier success. His career slowed. At the exact same time, Penny's career exploded. Laverne and Shirley turned her into one of the biggest stars on television. Fame didn't lift them together, it pulled them apart. Jealousy seeped in quietly. Schedules never aligned. They barely saw each other. Penny later described their life as two people living parallel lives under the same roof. Rob cooked, he shopped, she cleaned. They passed each other like co-workers, not spouses. She picked a date in her head. March. That's when her show shut down for the season. That's when Rob's hiatus began. Maybe then they could talk, actually talk. A woman hoping for a conversation with her husband shouldn't have to schedule it months in advance. By 1981, there was no dramatic blow-up, no screaming matches, no courtroom spectacle. Just a quiet divorce after 10 years of marriage. Penny later said they didn't fight. They just went different ways, but even after it ended, something stayed unfinished. She admitted they always believed they would get back together someday, when they were older, when life slowed down. That day never came. The divorce papers were signed in 1981. 10 years. No explosive fight. No scandal headline. Just two people quietly admitting that the life they built no longer fit. But what Penny carried afterward wasn't anger, it was hope. She would later confess something that feels almost unbearable to hear because it exposes how unfinished their love really was. They always thought they would get back together someday, when they were much older, When time finally slowed down, when the noise of success faded, they believed it. And maybe that belief is what kept them together longer than they should have stayed. Penny said pride played a role too. Pride, and that stubborn refusal to admit the dream was dying. But the reunion never happened. Rob moved on, he remarried, he started a new family, and time kept pushing Penny further away from the version of the future she had secretly saved for herself. Years later, even with distance and decades behind her, Penny still expressed sadness that they didn't work it out. Not in a dramatic romantic movie way, in the quiet way someone speaks when they've accepted reality but still feel the bruise. Then came a moment in 1990 that proved something strange. They could still communicate. Columbia Pictures originally scheduled Penny's film Awakenings and Rob's film Misery to release on the exact same day. Two former spouses, two separate lives, but suddenly competing head-to-head at the box office on the same night. Penny didn't like it. It felt wrong. So she picked up the phone and called Rob directly. She asked him plainly if he really wanted to come out the same night, if he really wanted to be looking at his ticket lines while she looked at hers. She told him she thought not. And the shared release date eventually changed. That phone call revealed what never completely disappeared between them. Even after everything, they still had a direct line to each other. They could still solve problems together, but underneath that calm conversation was something else, a tension, a competitive edge, a reminder that once they shared everything and now they didn't. And while Penny was trying to keep her dignity intact after the divorce, Rob was quietly transforming his pain into something that would become one of the most iconic romantic stories in modern film. Because during that same period of his single life, Rob admitted he was living through confusing, disastrous relationships one after another. He was stunned by the divorce, lost, convinced he might never find love again, and that version of him became the prototype for Harry, the man at the center of When Harry Met Sally, a love story that made millions of people believe in timing, in fate, in finding the right person at the right moment. While the truth was, it was born from a man who once had the right person and still lost her. From the outside, the story of Rob Reiner and Penny Marshall looks like classic Hollywood. Two ambitious people, two careers rising in different directions, a marriage pulled apart by schedules, pressure, jealousy, and emotional exhaustion. But underneath that simple explanation is something much more human. A wife who sat in the audience week after week, watching her husband play another woman's husband. A wife who felt something she couldn't name, couldn't prove, and wasn't allowed to confront. A husband caught in the middle, quietly warning one woman to keep her distance from the other, and then years later, the uncomfortable confirmation. Sally Struthers admitted she had real feelings for Rob Reiner. So Penny's suspicion wasn't just insecurity, it wasn't just jealousy, it was instinct. The kind of instinct people dismiss until time proves it wasn't imagined at all. And still, the story refuses to give anyone a clean answer. Did Rob ever truly understand how deep Sally's feelings were? Did Penny's suspicion slowly poison the marriage? Or was it simply exposing what was already there? Did the pressure of fame end them? Or did the emotional distance start long before their careers split? Some stories don't hand you closure. They just leave you with echoes. What we do know is this. Even after the divorce, Penny still wished it could have worked. Not in a fantasy way, in the quiet way that suggests she never fully let go of the someday they once believed in. But time didn't wait. On December 17th, 2018, Penny Marshall died from heart failure due to complications from diabetes. And when Rob spoke about her afterward, his words carried something that wasn't performance. It was grief. He called her someone born with a great gift, a funny bone, and the instinct to know exactly how to use it. He said living with her made him lucky. And then came the simplest line of all, the one that makes this story land like a weight. He said he missed her, and that missing her became his reality. That is what makes this story stay in people's minds, because it isn't really about celebrity. It's about what happens when love is mixed with doubt, when pride keeps people together too long, when time passes and the reunion you imagined never arrives, and at the center of it all, the same haunting image remains. Penny Marshall, sitting in that audience, needlepoint in hand, keeping herself busy so she wouldn't lose control. And the question that never dies, did she sense the truth before anyone else did? Or did the fear of losing him become the very thing that made her lose him?